Hello and welcome to the Big Blue Box podcast. This is episode 2. My name's Gary, thank you very much for joining me, and coming up in this show we've got some news roundups. I've got an interview with Neil Perryman, who's the author of the book Adventures with the Wife in Space. That's very cool. And we look at this episode's classic episode, which is Spearhead from Space. So without further ado, let's get into the news. So quite a sad one to kick off for the news this episode. Unfortunately, we've got a couple of deaths from cast members from the classic era. First up is Kate O'Mara. If you're into the classic stuff, you'll know that she featured as the Rani back in 1985, the first episode, The Mark of the Rani. But then she popped back up again for Sylvester McCoy, Time and the Rani in 1987. And she also made another appearance as well in 1993, actually, for the Children in Need spoof, Dimensions in Time, which was the Doctor Who comedy that they filmed in EastEnders for Children in Need. So that's pretty sad, and I'm pretty sure that there'll be some screenings of her episodes now that Doctor Who is on a few channels now. It's on BBC Three, it's on Watch, and it's now on the Horror Channel as well. So if you haven't seen any episodes featuring the Rani, they're pretty good. But Kate O'Mara was very, very good in those. So go and check those out. Secondly, Mr. Glyn Jones. Unfortunately, he died on the 5th of April. He's 82. He was one of the only guys, I think he was one of the only guys that actually wrote and appeared in Doctor Who. He wrote the first draft for the Space Museum, way back, officially Series 2, which was rewritten shortly after, but his script was mainly left intact. I think it was just more of the humorous parts which were chopped out, which I don't think he was too happy about. But he is credited as a writer on that. And then he returned as an actor. He played a character called Kranz in the Centauran Experiment back in 1975. So a couple of losses there for Doctor Who, which is never a good thing. But moving on, Mark Gatiss has been penned to write 2 episodes for the new series, for the new Doctor anyway. It's been around on Twitter and on a few sites recently that he would write a couple of episodes, and he kept quiet about it for a while. And then he pops up to say that yes, he will be writing a couple of episodes, which is good. But he did say that they won't necessarily be for Series 8, so that was interesting. So I know that he's definitely writing 1 episode for Series 8 with Peter Capaldi, which is going to be episode 3, which will fall into the 3rd production block. Which also leads me on to another casting update. A guy called Tom Riley. You might know him if you watch a TV series called Da Vinci's Demons. He actually plays Leonardo da Vinci in that, so he's going to pop up in that episode which Mark Gatiss is writing. And it's pretty clear from what he said that we won't actually see another episode from him inside of Series 8. So whether that will be Peter Capaldi still with us for Series 9 and onwards, I'm not sure. But Mark Gatiss has wrote a couple of good episodes, I reckon. Victory of the Daleks was very cool. I really enjoyed that. And of course, he wrote the docudrama Adventure in Space and Time for the 50th anniversary last year, which was absolutely brilliant. So if he can write a couple more episodes, that's going to be a good thing. Which leads me on to another bit of news, actually. That docudrama has actually been nominated for a BAFTA, An Adventure in Space and Time, for Best Single Drama in the Main Television Awards. So that's going to be, the winners of that are going to be announced on Sunday the 18th of May. So fingers crossed that Doctor Who can land an award there. Moving on, Doctor Who magazine. Talking of awards, Doctor Who magazine is also been in the awards scene. They've won the Ace Press Award for circulation excellence by a monthly magazine. So that's really good news. Doctor Who magazine is still going. It's a very, very cool magazine, actually. If even if you're slightly into Doctor Who, it's a really good read. They normally have interviews with really good people in there. This month's edition, it's got Paul McGann, so that's a really good read, and it's a really good magazine in terms of variety as well. It's not just all stories and stuff like that. It's got like a comic. It's got a comic section. It's got a classic era section. It's just full of really cool stuff. So if you don't subscribe to Doctor Who magazine and you're into Doctor Who, I'd definitely advise that. Next bit of news, Forbidden Planet have released some very cool t-shirts which you can pre-order, and I think they're out next month or the end of this month, if memory serves, and they look very cool. They're mainly focused on Capaldi, obviously, and they're called, a couple of them are just basically vector shapes. They're not like a photo of Peter Capaldi or anything like that. They're a very cool design. But one of them has got one of them called Vector Lineup is actually just three shoulders and head shots of Tennant, Smith, and Capaldi, which is very cool. So head over to Forbidden Planet, and you'll be able to pre-order those. And I'll be picking up the Vector Lineup one, I would have thought. So that's cool. And last bit of news: if you're into the music of Doctor Who, there's a new box set that's coming out. I think it must be due out the end of May, because they're taking pre-orders for it from the 25th of April up to the 9th of May, and that is the TARDIS edition of the Doctor Who soundtrack, which goes all the way back to Series 1, and Episode 1 in fact, An Unearthly Child, right through up until the 50th anniversary. It's a huge box set, and the TARDIS edition, it comes in a specially built wooden TARDIS with the doors open, and then you've got all of the CD slipcases and stuff like that. It looks very, very cool, and I'm sure I read somewhere that the light on top of the TARDIS actually works as well, and it's got sound effects when you open the door. And it's a monster box set. It literally has got all the music all the way through Doctor Who, including the made-for-TV movie with Paul McGann as well. So you can pre-order that from 10 a.m. UK time on the 25th of April, and pre-orders will end on the 2nd of May, at 10 a.m. There's no pricing on this yet. I'm expecting it to be a little on the pricey side, if I'm honest, because it does look, because you get so much music. I think it's got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, about 10, 11 discs. And it's chock-a-block full of music all the way through Doctor Who history. So, and the TARDIS edition as well. Because they advertise it as a TARDIS edition, I am assuming that there's going to be a regular edition where you don't get the TARDIS display box and all that kind of stuff. So I'm assuming we'll be able to buy the standard one. But yeah, I think it might be a bit pricey. But if you like the music of Doctor Who and you're into all that, then it will be a worthwhile purchase. If your other half or a good friend really likes the music of Doctor Who, this would be the perfect present. So any birthdays or anniversaries coming up and you're just stuck on what to get your better half, if they're a Doctor Who fan, then this would be a cracker. They're a really good present. Head over to doctorwhomusic.com, where you'll be able to pre-order it via way of Silver Screen Records. So that pre-order will go up on 10 a.m. on the 25th of April. Back in episode 1, I told you that I interviewed Neil Perryman, who's the author of the book Adventures with the Wife in Space. It was really cool catching up with Neil and asking him about the book and life in general and Doctor Who. So let's take a listen. So thank you very much to Neil for joining me on this episode. He is the author of Adventures with the Wife in Space. This is a fantastic book that I've read it probably, I'm on my second read through, so that's really how good this book is. And
very kind.
Yeah, it's because I can relate to the story so much. I think a lot of couples, especially guys who are into Doctor Who and their wife not so much, I think they can relate to this story pretty much word for word. So thank you very much, Neil. How are you doing?
I'm fine, Gary. Thanks for having me on the show.
No problem at all. So I thought I'd, before we kick off with some questions, do you want to just tell our listeners who haven't read the book or not aware of the project, just briefly what it's about and how it came about?
It's basically the story about this crazy idea I had one day, which was to make my wife, who's not a big fan of Doctor Who, especially old Doctor Who, she's never really seen any old Doctor Who, she quite liked the new series. And I thought, wouldn't it be good to get a fresh perspective on the programme from somebody who wasn't a fan? And I asked it to watch every single episode with me of the classic series, including the ones that didn't exist. And then I blogged about it, and it seemed to become quite popular. And there's a book that spun out of that, which is sort of the background story to our relationship and the impact of watching Doctor Who has had on it. And that's it in a nutshell.
So in a nutshell, you've used your wife as a guinea pig.
Yeah, basically.
Yeah. Okay, so that in a nutshell, it's basically you and your wife. You're checking out every single episode from the classic era, including the ones that were potentially lost.
Yeah.
Okay, so just focusing on you for a second, then, as a Doctor Who fan, from reading through your book and stuff, it's obvious that from a very young age, probably as long as you can remember, you've been a Doctor Who fan. Has there any other show that you've watched had this much of an impact on you, do you think? Or are you a Doctor Who guy, or is there any other thing that you're into?
I love all sorts of television, especially television from the 70s. I seem to be fixated on that era.
Okay.
Even stuff I wouldn't have been allowed to watch at that time. I just think it's the golden age of television, the 1970s. But Doctor Who is such a special place because it lasted for so long. There's no other program that sort of travelled with me through my life. So if you know what I mean, like I was into Blake 7 when that was on, but that was only 4 years of my life. It wasn't 44 years of my life, if you know what I mean. But there's nothing quite like Doctor Who. And I think that's the appeal of it, really. There's a kind of different episode or a different feel or era for whatever mood you might be in. You might want a comedy or a drama or something exciting or something a bit more thoughtful and surreal. There's something for everybody within that spectrum of Doctor Who, and I think that's why it has a big impact.
So I guess that's one of the reasons why it has lasted so long, because the show does offer something for everybody, and it literally regenerates itself every once in a while.
Yeah, that's it. There's no other program that can do that. I think the closest thing you've got is James Bond, but they don't even, address that issue of being the same character, or it's the only program that can do it within the narrative and continually reinvent itself and reflect the time that it was being made in. And I always feel that watching Doctor Who allows fans to sort of time travel themselves, and it allows them to time travel through their own past. And, the nostalgic aspect of it when you're watching a Tom Baker, you can't just watch it for the drama. You're also got the nostalgic aspect, if you saw it when it originally went out, that is.
Okay, so, yeah, I agree with you. So would you say that if there are any Doctor Who fans that have been watching the show since it came back in 2005, would you urge them to go back and check out some of the classic era?
Yeah, I think so, definitely. I mean, it's not going to be to everybody's taste. You're going to have to cherry pick, I think, the best episodes to show somebody. I wouldn't recommend starting from the beginning like I did and watching reconstructions of episodes that didn't exist. But there are some classic episodes out there which I think will not only appeal to the fans of the new series, but they'll also be able to see that it's exactly the same programme at its heart. For example, City of Death, which is a famous Tom Baker one set in Paris. I think it has that sort of playful aspect and that and the comedy aspect to it that I think fans of the new series will immediately latch onto. And I think I find it hard to believe that there are people out there who wouldn't be curious to see what these other Doctors look like if they've invested all this time in the three Doctors we've had since the series came back. I find it hard to believe that people wouldn't at least want to go back and have a look at some of the old stuff, especially now that the programme is trading so much on its past.
Sure. I mean, I'm a good example of that. I got into Doctor Who after it came back in 2005. Mm-hmm. So I'm a newbie. I hate the word Who. Yeah, I'm a newbie Who fan, if you like. So, but I have been going back and looking at the classic stuff, and I've probably got about half a dozen, maybe 9 or 10 classic Who episodes. And I love them.
What decision did you? I mean, how did you choose the ones that you've been watching? Is it are the fans telling you?
Yeah, well, originally because I'd been aware of the classic Who stuff. And I just jumped on a couple of forums and just asked a really open question. For somebody who hasn't checked out any of the classic Who, what would you recommend? Yeah. And there were a few favourites that popped up all the time that people recommended, like Genesis of the Daleks. Pyramids of Mars, and to be honest with you, they were
Yeah.
mainly the Tom Baker Davison ones.
Yes, yes, yes.
And so I've got the ones that I currently own are predominantly Tom Baker and Peter Davison. I've got the Unearthly Child at the very beginning. And a few others, but I love them, so I'm gradually going through and just picking up a couple of discs every month now. So
I mean, I'm really jealous of someone in that position. You got that whole 26 years to enjoy. You know, it's great. It must be great. It's like watching Breaking Bad from the start. Well, maybe not quite as good as that, but
not as quite, yeah. Yeah, so a lot of, actually, that's a good point. A lot of people do say that. They wish that they could be in my shoes to check out the all of this stuff from a fresh, new perspective, if you like. So,
yeah.
yeah. Okay, so as you got into recording the show and doing the blog and stuff like that, I would imagine that your relationship with Sue would have taken a different turn. You must have spent a lot of time together if you were watching an episode every single day.
Yeah, it was well, we tried to. Sometimes we watched more, sometimes real life got in the way. But I think one of the reasons why I wanted to do it, I mean, to be honest with you, I didn't think it would last much longer than the first couple of series. I think the first couple of stories, I thought she'd get bored of it or, you know, run out of steam. I wasn't really expecting her to go all the way through. But one of the reasons I wanted to do it is because I wanted to do something with Sue. Normally our projects have always been something that we've done independently, like Sue's into woodwork and DIY and she does all that, and I'm into my blogging and my science fiction and I do all that. So it was nice to actually bring those, you know, come together as a team and do something together. And I think that was one of the reasons why we did get to the end, because we kept each other going even through the difficult moments.
You supported each other as a marriage should do.
Yeah.
Cool. So did you feel any pressure though to carry on? So as the blog got more and more popular, and you found yourself with more followers and more people checking it out, did you feel any pressure not to let anybody down and keep going on?
Definitely. I mean, I did. I don't think Sue did. Sue didn't find it difficult at all. I think the reason why Sue didn't find it difficult is because she didn't know what was coming, whereas I knew that we might be a particularly long 10-parter or a massive run of reconstructions that we'd have to sit through. So I got a little bit more down about it than she did. And there's certain areas of the show I'm not a particular fan of. I mean, I never used to like Pertwee very much, but having watched them with Sue, I can sort of appreciate John Pertwee a lot more now. So, there were times I felt a bit of pressure, and sometimes we had a little bit of a rest so we could recharge our batteries. But on the whole, I'm really glad that I did it. Cool.
Speaking of John Pertwee, the last classic one that I watched was Spearhead from Space, and I thought that excellent.
Yeah, that's a great one, Spearhead from Space. That's one of the few stories that Sue gave 10 out of 10 to.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Cool.
She gave 3 stories 10 out of 10, and that was one of them. But having said that, I think the reason she gave it 10 out of 10 is because she'd watched all these black and whites and all these reconstructions, and all of a sudden she had a nice 4-parter in colour, and I think she would have given anything 10 out of 10 at that point.
Oh, cool. Okay, so has Sue changed her mind a little bit on Doctor Who now that she's seen everything? And to be honest, she probably knows more about Doctor Who than your average watcher now, but has her opinion changed on it much at all?
Well, she's probably one of the few people that have sat through every single episode, including the ones that don't exist. I mean, I know a lot of Doctor Who fans who describe themselves as hardcore Doctor Who fans. They would never describe themselves as a Whovian, otherwise I'd disown them. But they haven't sat through all the reconstructions, and there are certain episodes that they haven't even sat through. And to be honest, when I started this, there were episodes I hadn't seen either. So actually going through this process made me watch some episodes I'd never actually seen before, especially from the William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton era. But yeah, I think Sue appreciates the old show now. I think she understands why I'm so obsessed with it, and I think it's also enhanced her enjoyment of the new series, because now when she watches episodes that trade on the history of the old series, especially towards the end of Matt Smith's tenure, she really appreciates all those references now, and she gets them. So yeah, I think it's been a good experience for her as well as me. Yeah.
Yeah, I was going to come on to that because I think there's you've got a video on your site. It's an interview with Sue. I think you're conducting the interview.
Yeah.
And she does actually mention that she has a more appreciation for the newer stuff now. And I can definitely relate to that because the show has got so much history.
Yeah.
So much to draw from. It really does give you a bit more of a larger viewport, if you like, when you're watching the newer stuff as well.
Yeah, it's interesting because when the show first came back in 2005, for the first year or so, they went to great pains to not really connect with the old series at all. I don't think Gallifrey was even name checked for 2 years.
Right.
But now it just seems like all of the past, the great intelligence of all the villains to come back. They bring back a villain that didn't actually exist in any episodes at the time.
Right.
But the great thing is Sue knew who that villain was. And I didn't, I mean, I'm sure she would have enjoyed it anyway, but the fact that she knew it was connected, she kept expecting the Yeti to turn up. That was the only problem. But yeah, I think it's been interesting to see, especially in the 50th anniversary year, how much the programme traded on its past, which I think is a good thing.
Definitely a good thing.
Mm-hmm.
So with moving from the blog through to the book, what was your process for taking what you put down on an internet blog essentially into written form into a book?
Mm-hmm. That was the challenge because I think people expected me just to take the blog and stick it in the book.
Right.
And that would have been the the easiest thing to do. But a real publisher wouldn't have done that. That was something I'd have had to have done myself. They were looking for something that had more, not so much mainstream appeal, but you didn't have to be a hardcore Doctor Who fan or have, read the blog to get it. So really I was trying to go for a more universal appeal and sort of talk about being a Doctor Who fan from my perspective, and then talk about how it had an impact on my marriage. And it was quite a tricky process to get that tone right, so it could appeal to both fans of the programme and people who probably didn't necessarily know a lot about the classic series especially.
Okay, and did you have to approach more than one publisher? Did you have any interest before this? Did anybody want to work with you in particular, or did you have to hunt down a few publishers that would work with you?
Well, it was weird because I didn't plan on writing the book at all, and it was an editor who got in touch with me and who worked for the publishers Faber and Faber, and it was their suggestion that I turn it into a book. So it wasn't something I was planning to do myself, and I wasn't searching out publishers or anything like that. Like I said, the only plan I really had was maybe at the end I'd self-publish it as an ebook, as the blog collected in an ebook. I didn't have any plans beyond that. So I was very lucky. I didn't have to go searching for anybody.
Oh well, that's very cool. So did you, in terms of putting the book together in book form, did you have to go through and revisit all of the blog posts and did you have to take notes on anything, or did you have to, the actual process of turning, I've got a very cool blog, and I've been approached, to do this book. Did you have to go through, maybe did you have to relearn on how to write for a physical book, or did you have to just...
Well, yeah, it's a tricky one, that, because I come from an academic background, and most of my writing over the years has been academic papers, and that is a completely different audience to the audience I've been writing for in this book. So yeah, it took quite a while, like I said, to find the right tone and the right structure and the right approach, because I could have started that book in a million different ways, and it was quite hard. That was the hardest part, is actually narrowing it down into the best approach to tell a story that hopefully everybody can relate to. So yeah, it was tricky. It was quite a challenge.
And did you have to proofread it with Sue?
Oh yeah, so yeah, what would happen is I would write large chunks of it, and then I would read it out to her, and anything that she didn't like or disagreed with would be edited out. And Sue wrote her own chapter as well, and she found that an interesting experience, because I don't think she's done any writing of that nature before. And it's probably the funniest chapter in the book, actually. Yeah,
I was going to say, Sue put a chapter in there, so she acted as kind of as an editor as well.
Yeah, she sort of runs throughout. She's all the way through the book. She's either interrupting me or clarifying things for me, or like I said, writing her own chapter, her own perspective on what it was like when we met.
Cool. So, the book aside, going back to you as a Doctor Who fan for a second, and you're saying that you wasn't a fan of all of the classic episodes. You had your favourite Doctors, perhaps, and your favourite episodes. What would you say is your favourite classic episode?
Well, that's
and why?
Tricky one, that one. That's really tricky. I sort of have two favourite Doctors. I've got Tom Baker, who's the Doctor of my childhood, and then Sylvester McCoy, who's the Doctor of when I just became an adult and started to get into fandom and sort of look at Doctor Who more than just a television programme. So I'm torn between Ghostlight, which is a Sylvester McCoy story, which is notoriously difficult for some fans to understand.
What was that light? He was so scared of it.
Doctor, I can personally assure you, Mr. Fenn Cooper is being made comfortable and will come to no harm.
Only the madman may see the path clearly through the tangled forest.
And then there's probably, I don't know, Seeds of Doom. I've got a soft spot for the Seeds of Doom, which is a Tom Baker story.
Are you okay dressed like that? You don't seem to notice the cold.
I haven't come 10,000 miles to discuss the weather, Mr. Mobley. Can I see the sick man?
Yes, of course. Thank you. Down this way.
I've got very vivid memories of watching that one.
Seeds of Doom, is that in the manor house with the pods that come down and yeah?
It's the pods. It's the giant vegetables.
That's right. Yeah, it starts off in the Arctic, doesn't it?
Yeah, that's right.
It's
almost like a two-parter and a four-parter joined together. Almost, you get this nice little two-part, which is like a thing from another world, set in Antarctica, and then you get a four-parter set in a stately home, which is insane.
And it's as I remember, it stars at the time the infamous Boise from Only Fools.
That's right, John
Yes.
Challis. John Challis is in it. And again, the Seeds of Doom is one of only 3 stories that Sue gave 10 out of 10 to. So she's got, great taste.
Wow, I was going to say you got good taste because I imagine she wasn't into Doctor Who that much apart from watching you watch it before.
Yeah, she never had any, she never sat down and watched it with me before this point. I managed to hide Doctor Who from Sue for about 20 years.
Cool. And what would you say is your worst Doctor Who episode?
The thing is, even in the worst Doctor Who episodes, there's usually some kind of enjoyment you can get out of it.
Of course, yeah.
But very occasionally you do get one which is just very difficult. I mean, it's difficult to pick one out. I think Time and the Rani was a bad one, and the Twin Dilemma also, both for the same reason. It's like when you're starting off a new Doctor, you want to hit the ground running and you want to drag the audience in with you. You don't want to start with the worst possible story you can come up with. It just gets the era off to a bad start. And those 2 episodes were just, oh, wow. It's not something I'm going to put on DVD very soon, let's put it that way.
Okay, and since the show came back in 2005, are there any particular Doctors from the new era that you perhaps gravitate to? Any favourite episodes from the newer stuff?
Right, yeah. I like Matt Smith. Of the three Doctors, I like Matt Smith the most. Okay. And I was quite resistant when I heard he had been cast because he's a small child. I mean, I'm practically old enough to be his dad. So that took a bit of getting used to. But I think Matt Smith has been the best of the 3. And of all the episodes that I really like, I think Amy's Choice stands out for me, and The Girl Who Waited as well. They're 2 excellent episodes from the new series. But there's been great episodes from all those new Doctors. Yeah,
there has been for sure. And I assume that, like my wife, your wife likes the David Tennant era.
Yeah. My wife's a big fan of David Tennant. Yeah. I mean, I'm not that big a fan of David Tennant, but he has had some great stories. I think his best one for me was probably Midnight. I love that story. I mean, that's the sort of story they could have done in the classic series. It didn't need huge special effects. It was essentially just people in a room talking, and but really exciting at the same time.
Yeah, for sure. And you mentioned that Matt Smith is probably out of the newer stuff. Matt Smith is probably your favourite Doctor. I kind of agree with you because, in my opinion, Matt Smith has a lot of traits from the classic Doctors. He's very Patrick Troughton sometimes, and a bit zany and stuff.
Yeah, Sue said that when she watched Patrick Troughton. She said she was immediately reminded of Matt Smith, and she could see the mannerisms, not just the bow tie, but also the sort of the cheekiness of the persona at times as well. So yeah, it's interesting. He's obviously been influenced by Patrick Troughton.
Definitely, yeah. So the hype machine's going pretty fast and furious now for Series 8 and Peter Capaldi. You looking forward to Peter?
Yeah, very much so, because like I said, I've had a few Doctors that have either been younger than me or the same age as me, and this is really nice to go back to a Doctor that's older than me, which is, goes back to childhood again when you want a Doctor that you can look up to. And I think Capaldi is he the oldest, or he's nearly the oldest? I think he's actually the oldest, isn't he? He's older than William Hartnell. William Hartnell was a lot younger than he looked. And I think he's going to bring a different energy to the performance. I think it'll be a little bit edgier, maybe a little bit darker. I don't think we'll have Peter Capaldi for very long. I think he'll be maybe a 1-year Doctor like Eccleston, but I think it's going to be one hell of a ride.
Oh wow, okay. So so you think Capaldi will only be around for a short time then?
Yeah, I think he's signed a short contract. I think he's too big an actor.
Right.
So I don't know. It depends how that first year goes. Perhaps there is an option to stay on. Who knows? But whatever happens, those 13 episodes, 14 episodes, whatever he does, should be tremendous, because he's one of the greatest actors of his generation, I believe.
Yeah, it's very cool. As long as the language isn't on par with Malcolm Tucker, then
I'm pretty sure the language will be toned down, but I'm sure that energy, that quite frightening energy. I mean, just the eyes reminded me of Tom Baker in that short sequence that we saw at Christmas. The wild staring eyes. That he looked, as alien as he did when Tom Baker played him.
Sure, and the costume is a bit Pertwee-ish. Would you say?
Oh, it's very Pertwee, yeah, and it's again, it's not sort of screaming, "I'm wearing a costume." It looks practical. It looks like something somebody would wear. It's not like a Colin Baker or Sylvester McCoy or even a Peter Davison costume. It looks practical, and he looks like he could walk into any environment and not turn heads. And that's really what you want. You don't want to be walking into a situation dressed as a cricketer. Sometimes, I'm sure. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Cool. I saw on Twitter the other day. I think it was April the 1st. That you probably know what I'm going to say, but yeah, Sue. I think Sue pranked you and said that she would start watching all the new stuff.
Yeah.
Did you fall for it at first?
Well, no. I mean, I knew she was winding me up because she did exactly the same thing the year before. So.
Oh right, okay.
So and now she feels really bad if anybody on Twitter believed her, and some people did. I'm really sorry about that. But there are no plans to do the new series.
Yeah, I for one did believe you, and I was very gutted when you said it wasn't going to happen. So
you got to check the date on these things. We do that. It's like the second time I've done it, and I couldn't believe people fell for it. I just assumed that people would know. But no, I don't think there's any point in doing the new series. I think for various different reasons. Number one, people are probably sick to death of us by now, and secondly, Sue loved the new series, and it would just be Sue saying how wonderful it is for 2 years, and I don't know if there's any point in doing that. Maybe the point would be if she blogged me doing it, because I'm not a bigger fan of the new series as series, so it would be like role reversal. But no, there's no plans to do that.
No plans, right? Okay. Yeah, I did check the date earlier on in the day. I did see a few tweets with people saying, "Don't believe anything you read today," and I forgot it within a second and just walked right into it. So
I apologise.
So you're actually in not with Doctor Who, but you're in the middle of another adventure with Sue. This is Blake 7.
Yes, our second and final adventure.
Final,
yeah, definitely. This will be the last one. But yeah, we thought. To be honest with you, as we come into the end of Doctor Who, I was enjoying it so much by that point. I sort of didn't want it to end, and there was a lot of pressure from people to carry on with the new series, and I thought, I'm not doing that. And I thought, well, let's see if there's anything else that's similar to Doctor Who that you'd never seen before, which had a similar kind of fan base, and Blake 7 seemed the obvious choice. So we're almost halfway through Blake 7 at the moment, and that should finish by the summer, we hope.
Okay, so is this the same setup as before? Has Sue not seen any Blake 7 before at all?
No, never seen an episode. I think it's because, well, she's a little bit older than me, so when Blake 7 went out, she was, I think she was playing badminton at the time, and there was no video recorders, and obviously, to be honest with you, even if she had been at home, I don't think she would have watched it. It wasn't really her cup of tea. So it's great, really, because, again, she knows nothing about Blake 7, and she's coming to it with completely fresh eyes, and there's quite a lot of twists and turns coming up that she knows nothing about. I mean, obviously, she'd go on Wikipedia if she wanted to, but she doesn't care enough to do that, so it's good in a way. She allows herself to be surprised. So, I'm looking forward to certain episodes coming up, obviously.
And what are you guys going to do when this finishes then? Because you'll have no projects in the public eye. You'll have...
No, we're going to retreat back into our normal lives, and Sue's going to... Sue wants to build a house again, so it's Sue's turn after this. I think she's suffered enough with making me waking her watch stuff, and now I'm going to help her build a house, so that's the plan.
That's the plan. You're not going back to a caravan, are you?
Yeah, probably.
Oh, you are?
Yeah, I can't believe I'm saying this, but yeah, I think I never would have said that if you'd asked me a few years ago, but how can I turn her down? I mean, I owe her big time for this, so anything she wants.
Anything, yeah, okay. Yeah, I totally agree. And so just to end then, is there anything we can expect from you in terms of just general sci-fi, Doctor Who, anything after Blake 7's finished, or are you literally going to retreat and just enjoy everything quietly as a fan?
Well, I don't know. I mean, I haven't got any plans to do anything. I find it hard to believe that when it's all over, I won't be tempted to write something about something online, or maybe elsewhere. I don't know. But at the moment, I'm just focusing on getting Blake 7 finished, and I'm really been the support's been great from everybody as well. So I just want to make sure that we go out with a bang.
Okay, cool. Right, well, thank you very, very much for joining me, Neil. It's been a pleasure talking to you.
Thanks for having me.
And we will catch up on Twitter and other social stuff in the near future, I'm sure. Thank you very much.
Thanks very much. Bye-bye.
Thanks again to Neil for taking time out to talk to me about his new book and life in general and Doctor Who. That's very cool. You can pick up his book from all good bookshops. You can order it online on Amazon, the Book Depository, WH Smith. I really recommend that you pick the book up. It's a very, very good read. And you can follow Neil on Twitter as well, if you just do a search for @WifeInSpace. And also be sure to check out his new project, Adventures with the Wife and Blake. So, moving on to our classic Doctor Who episode. This is Spearhead from Space.
Delighted, Miss Shaw, delighted.
What are you a doctor of, by the way?
Practically everything, my dear.
From what we can gather, you arrived last night in the middle of a shower of meteorites.
Did I really? How terribly exciting.
Well, objects from space, at any rate. You must realize that I can't let you go until I'm sure there's no connection
But I've
between...
no recollection of last night. That's most unfair. How could I... What on earth are these?
Those are bits of what the Brigadier thought might be a meteorite.
Plastic?
It's not thermoplastic, and neither is it thermosetting. And there are no polymer chains.
That's interesting. I wonder what was inside.
So, John Pertwee's first story as the Doctor, released back in 1970, was written by Robert Holmes and runs for 4 episodes, so it's not too long and they're only 25 minutes each. This was the first episode of Doctor Who to be released in colour. If you've been watching the William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton stuff, you're probably a bit fed up with black and white at that point, although it didn't look too bad. It was, in terms of visual quality and viewing experience. I would imagine back in the time in 1970 when you first saw Spearhead from Space, it would have been very cool if you had a colour television. So I really enjoyed Spearhead from Space. I quite like John Pertwee's performance. I wouldn't say he's my favourite of the classic era. I do enjoy some of the aspects that he brings to the role as the Doctor, but I wouldn't say that he's my favourite. He certainly doesn't pip the post in way of Tom Baker or Peter Davison or even Patrick Troughton. Patrick Troughton's very, very cool. But in any case, he is the third Doctor. He is cemented in history throughout the overall timeline of Doctor Who. So his first story, Spearhead from Space, if you go back to the Troughton stuff right at the end, he is actually forced to regenerate and is trapped on Earth. He's in exile. He's not allowed to leave. They tampered with the TARDIS, so he's stuck here. So the first time we see the Doctor is the TARDIS appear in the middle of a field somewhere, and the Doctor just collapses. He falls out of the TARDIS, collapses on the floor, and that's the first time we see John Pertwee. So it's and they kind of keep that same thing going on throughout Doctor Who, where post regeneration he's just out of it. He doesn't know what's going on. He's very weak. He doesn't know what's going on. So that's how we were greeted with the first time we see John Pertwee as the Doctor. We've also see a new companion as well, by way of Liz Shaw, played by Caroline John. She's noted down as an assistant in these early episodes, but I'm going to call her a companion because, in my opinion, that's more her role. And we also see once again the Brigadier, Mr. Alistair Lethbridge Stewart. So he's back with us as head of unit, and this is the first time that we see more of an intimate relationship between the Brigadier and the Doctor. He does pop up numerous times after this episode, and there is some very good banter between him and the Doctor, especially John Pertwee's character. So the story set up, essentially, we're treated to the Nestine consciousness, and its ability to assimilate plastics mainly. It's got an affinity for plastics, and in this one, they've kind of advanced it another level. And so instead of seeing the typical shop dummy kind of look with the very obvious plastic face and stuff, they're now able to animate humanoid facsimiles. So essentially, they're just copying people, which is very cool. I mean, we didn't really see much of that. If you think back to 2005, the very first episode of Doctor Who when it came back in 2005 with Chris Eccleston, that episode featured the Autons. So the Autons are the plastic forms, if you like, which are controlled by the Nestine. And this was Chris Eccleston's first villain that he faced. And there's some... Russell T Davies must have taken a lot of inspiration from Spearhead, because there are very similar scenes, very key scenes. So in Spearhead, a bit later on, there's a scene where it's a high street in some town somewhere, and all the shop dummies start coming to life. They break through the windows and start attacking people. And it's very much a straight copy in the episode Rose, that first one back in 2005, where the Doctor's trying to track down the Nestine consciousness, and while this is going on, he's controlling all the shop dummies, and they do the same thing where they break through the glass, through the window, and all that stuff. So it still has a lot of inspiration for current or very recent Doctor Who writing, and the Autons are quite cool villains as well. They're a bit sinister because there's no expressions on their face. I'm talking about the very obvious plastic face shop dummy Autons. They're very because when you don't see anyone's expression or anything like that, it's quite sinister. You don't know what's hiding behind there. So I'm a fan of the Autons. Really, they haven't really popped up that much in terms of repeat villains. If you look at things like Daleks, Cybermen, even Weeping Angels, they appear quite a few times. But the Autons are a good Doctor Who secret, if you like, that they can probably pull out the bag at some point in the future, because it hasn't been overused or overwritten in any of the episodes. So the story runs through that there's this Nestine consciousness. It's powering these Autons, but it can't take a full physical form because it doesn't have a power supply. And we see these fall to Earth in form of meteorites at the beginning of the episode, and one of them's captured by a poacher, a farmer type guy. So it stops the Nestine from completing its 100% physical form because it hasn't got this master power supply. And so the Doctor kind of he quickly gets up and running with the story. We see him for a while, probably about the first quarter of the story, maybe the third. We don't see him do much really. He's just trapped. Well, not trapped, but he's in and out of consciousness in hospital because he's found just laying unconscious by the TARDIS. And so he's in hospital, and it's quite amusing watching the doctors examine his body and find his alien anatomy. He's got 2 hearts that show up on the X-ray and some other stuff. Yeah, they comment on his respiratory system and that kind of stuff, which is quite cool. But then, he's quickly, up and into the game. So he gets a new companion, like I said, with Liz Shaw, and between them, with the help of Unit and the Brigadier, they do eventually track down the source of evil, which is the Nestine. And the story kind of flits in and out between. You've got these sub characters. You've got the guy who runs this plastic manufacturing factory. Recently they were just factoring toys, so kiddies, dolls, and stuff, and then it's quickly overrun by the Nestine and the Autons. And all of this happens in quite a close proximity. I think when the Doctor lands in the TARDIS and where these meteorites come down, I think it's in Epping. Somebody correct me on that if I'm wrong. Epping in Essex somewhere. And this plastic factory is not too far away at all, so it's not that difficult for the Doctor to track down and for Unit to track down where the source of the problem is. And they get kind of a big clue as well, where one of the employees, one of the guy that did some work at the factory, turns up, and he gets sacked on the spot and gets told to leave, and he senses immediately that something isn't wrong. And it's not until he breaks back into the factory to try and find out that he comes into contact with one of the Autons, and that literally scares the hell out of him. The people that he comes in contact with after he's done a runner happens to be UNIT, so they have a pretty big clue that something isn't right at this plastics factory, and then it's only a matter of time before the Doctor and Liz and UNIT storm the place, take out the Nestine, and all is well. So the Doctor's performance in this, like I said, I kind of like Jon Pertwee. There's this one thing I just can't get out of my head, and it's when he's in like a physical struggle, or if he's in a fight with somebody, and that is when he's in a headlock, or somebody's strangling him or whatever. He does this face where it's just Wurzel Gummidge. That's the only way I can describe it. It's meant to be a scene of like, oh crap, the Doctor, he's being strangled here, whatever. What's going on? And then he pulls his face, his eyes go cross-eyed, and he's got this strange kind of grimace, kind of grin thing. And as soon as I saw it, I just immediately thought of Wurzel Gummidge, and it made me laugh. It just it kind of spoilt the scene for me a little bit, and it happens a couple of times in this episode anyway, where it's just totally Wurzel Gummidge. And yeah, so other than that, he's pretty good. He's kind of a suave, proper English gentleman, as the Doctor should be, I guess. Yeah, I mean, I'll probably have to watch a few more of Pertwee's stuff. The only other episode of his that I own is Inferno, which is a cracking story, very, very good, and he's better in that than he is in this, admittedly, because that's once he's been in the role of the Doctor for a while now, and he's very much found his rhythm, and that's much better in my opinion. But I did still enjoy Spearhead from Space. It's very, very cool. And so I picked it up on Blu-ray, and it's the only episode from the classic era that appears, which is capable of a HD master and a transfer onto Blu-ray. All of the other classic stuff, which runs right away from the beginning. Obviously, the first two series with Hartnell and Troughton, which are the old black and white series, you wouldn't expect that to be capable of HD anyway. But the Jon Pertwee stuff was the first. His first episode was the first Doctor Who in colour as well, and so you wouldn't expect the stuff prior to that to be capable of it anyway. But even right up until the Doctor Who movie, that wasn't done in HD either. And this was the reason for that is at the time they were running very short. Well, the BBC was running very short on just standard TV film. So they had to dig out some proper film stock, which was used for feature films at the time. And it just looks absolutely it's just so good on Blu-ray. I was very, very surprised. I'd read a couple of reviews prior to this, saying that people were very impressed with the picture quality, but I kind of had this feeling before that, how good can it be for something that was released back in 1970? How good can the picture look? But I'm not sure it was the BBC directly, but whichever company they chose to do the HD master and the transfer, it's just so good. Especially some of the outdoor scenes. It looked like it was filmed last week. It's very, very cool. It's a really good restoration, and because I thought that a friend of mine has got the DVD version of this, and I thought that looked very good just on DVD, but on Blu-ray it's another step up completely. You can really tell the difference. So if your collection consists mainly of Blu-rays, if you're really into HD, then definitely pick this up. Especially if you've been watching if you're going through the classic stuff and you're fed up of black and white Doctor Who, then this will come bursting onto your screen with a very, very good picture quality and really good color correction and all that sort of stuff. It's very, very cool. So that wraps up Spearhead from Space. I'm probably gonna, I'm not really into ratings and on this podcast or anything, but if I had to give it out of 10, I'd probably say it would be a 7, which I think is fair to say. And I will have to check out some more Pertwee stuff as well as Inferno. So that wraps up Spearhead. Thank you very much for joining me for episode 2 of the Big Blue Box podcast. Thank you very much to Neil Perryman for joining me. That was a very, very good chat that we had, and talking all things Doctor Who. I would love to hear your thoughts on this podcast, so in iTunes please leave a rating and leave a review, and you can also leave me some comments if you're listening on the site over at bigblueboxpodcast.co.uk. So I'd love to hear your thoughts. You can hit me up on Twitter at bigblueboxpcast. You can also find me on Facebook, facebook.com/Big Blue Box Podcast. Thank you once again for joining me. I look forward to seeing you in episode 3. So until then, Alonzi!